Welcome, dear learners, to week 4 of this course, which is about environmental non-fiction. The overview of environmental non-fiction. Environmental non-fiction is a genre that aims to educate, inform, and often mobilize readers about critical issues concerning the environment, nature, and human interactions with ecosystems. So, non-fiction basically is different from fiction because it tells you about the way certain things work, about the hows and wheres and what of something, and it is supposed to be matter of fact. But even though it is matter of fact, there is a great variety of non-fiction on climate change, and much of it is written in a very creative and literary language. This genre blends factual scientific information with personal narratives, investigative journalism, and cultural critiques. So, environmental non-fiction need not be just a discussion of technology or discussion of something, its process in an insipid manner. It can be something that is autobiographical, it can be personal views or narrations, or it can be in the form of reports. It serves as a bridge between the scientific community. And this non-fiction, it covers a lot of topics and subtopics related to climate change, conservation, pollution, species extinction, environmental justice, and sustainable development, as we are about to see in this lesson and the next lesson. And it is just not a passive observation of environmental issues. It is, in reality, a call to action, urging readers to engage with global environmental movements and participate in solutions. So, there are many philosophical sides to this non-fiction, and for example, a writer like Dipen Chakraborty, he belongs to the field of history. He's a historian, but he has written about climate change through history. So, climate change books, non-fiction books, need not be written by only people who are in the discipline of science. It can relate to a whole lot of other subjects, to humanities and to social sciences also. So, Dipendra Chakraborty, he talks about the climate of history that we will discuss later on. So, his book also is a call for action, a sweeping look at history, seeing it from the lens of climate change. And why was the need for climate non-fiction, for environmental non-fiction? Why did the need arise? The pressing global concerns, the global issues, the global warming, all these things made the entry of climate or environmental non-fiction into publishing and into the market. And like scientists from the 17th century onwards, they were trying to formulate their theories and their views on the increasing carbon content in the atmosphere. But the thing is that their writings would only be confined to science and the principles of science. Um, However, the climate nonfiction or environmental nonfiction tends to be interdisciplinary, and they are people who write from the perspective of a variety of disciplines, and they express their concerns about the various impacts of climate change, and looking through the lens of their discipline, they try to suggest some resolutions or some ways to combat climate change. Climate nonfiction has arisen from early naturalist works, and today the publications emphasize the impact of climate change, biodiversity loss, and the need for sustainability. So, if we look back to science texts or texts that talk about climate or texts that talk about species, all these environmental non-fiction texts from the 18th century also, and maybe earlier than that, they celebrate nature, and this kind of work, it gave rise to the recent non-fiction on climate change, biodiversity loss, and the need for sustainability. This genre often combines vivid descriptions of the natural world with an exploration of environmental challenges, blending storytelling with science to inspire change. So, occasionally there might be a story, even in a non-fiction work. When we think of Amitav Ghosh's The Great Derangement, it is a book that talks about the Anthropocene and the need to get out of the Anthropocene, and it also talks about the relationship between uh, literature and climate, literature and climate change. Uh, it is a non-fiction book, and it is meant to inform. So that too has anecdotes in it, and discussing issues in a conversational manner. He happens to mention Dipesh Chakravarti also, and he happens to mention previous literary texts and current climate fiction works that are written with a view to connect literature with climate change. So his work is climate non-fiction, but he deals with fiction also, and he deals with the pressing issues of the day, that is global warming and the climate impact. Sustainability is an important objective in many of these non-fiction texts. It is a key theme which deals with the responsible use of natural resources to ensure the well-being of future generations. So there are many things that are discussed uh, in climate fiction which are related to sustainability. There is an important Norwegian writer, Arne Næss. Now, Arne Næss, his writing is not exactly fictional writing. It is non-fiction, but with a difference. He is a Norwegian writer uh, who is responsible for bringing in the idea of deep ecology. So he talks about deep ecology, he talks about nature by celebrating it, and he talks about the beauty of nature and the need to preserve it, and especially the need to preserve the nature in the mountains. So he talks about the responsibility to use natural resources sensibly and responsibly, and to use it sustainably, and to keep in mind that the future should be sort of planned for. Many writers, they explore how societies can transition to more sustainable practices such as renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and water conservation. So, these environmental non-fiction books, they also talk about renewable energy resources and about ways of sustainable agriculture and water conservation, and the connection of human life to it, the connection of human survival to a sustainable existence. There are numerous important authors in this genre. The first and the most important is Rachel Carson, and she is widely regarded as the mother of the modern environmental movement. And her non-fiction book, The Silent Spring, though presented in a very creative way, and you can see the title also, it is a book of non-fiction. It is one of the most influential environmental books of all time. She was a marine biologist and a writer, and through her impressive prose, through her beautiful creative writing, she exposed the harmful effects of pesticides, particularly DDT, on ecosystems. So her way of writing is very literary and very fluid, and yet she manages to convey important scientific truths and also facts behind climate change and things about land and air pollution that is caused by DDT. So, so she is one example of a non-fiction writer who can write about science in a beautiful and impressive and effective manner, which can capture the readers. Often the layman might feel that a science book is difficult to understand with all the heavy terms, but she has a way of simplifying it and making it read as if it were a creative work and a work of art. As I said, the title itself is so suggestive, Silent Spring. For one who did not know what it is about, they would think Silent Spring is the name of some novel, and sounds a bit romantic also, but actually the reality is very stark. It's not the silence of peace and joy and harmony, it is the silence of death that she's talking about, how DDT has killed that vegetation in that area, and that's why it is all white and silent. No birds are singing, no insects, no butterflies, no greenery is seen because of DDT. It kind of inspires and has inspired later writers to write a whole lot of climate fiction, which is dystopian in nature. Bill McKibben is a leading environmentalist, author, and activist. His work, The End of Nature, 1989, was one of the first to alert the public to the dangers of global warming. He has founded the global climate movement 350.org, which campaigns for reducing carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. So, he is also an activist, and he is also a writer and an environmentalist, and he is one of the first to alert the public about the dangers of global warming. Naomi Klein is a journalist and author who examines the relationship between environmental degradation and economic systems. So she feels that capitalism is one of the major causes behind climate change. And as we um, studied in an earlier lesson, how capitalism affects us in different ways, how it creates the climate impact through different ways. So one of them is food, how our food is manipulated by the capitalist system and by the market. So the food that comes is neither authentic, and the food deprives the one who creates it. It impoverishes the very sources that create it. So, and it gives the privilege of food and access to only a few. So this is what capitalism is in actual, and leading to environmental degradation. So she explores the relationship between environmental degradation and economic systems. The book, This Changes Everything, Capitalism versus the Climate. So even Dipesh Chakravarty talks about capitalism, how it has manipulated the idea of human history and the idea of human freedom, and silencing natural history, silencing or obliterating or erasing the natural world. So whatever he says is gained by humanity in the name of freedom. Freedom to live, freedom to eat, freedom to exist in whichever way one likes, freedom to wear whatever one wants to wear. All this is rooted in nature. All this uses nature as a resource. So it's capitalism that removes that place or role that nature has, and divorces human history from natural history, where natural history is nothing, only human history is important. So this is how capitalism sort of manipulates climate. She calls for a transformation of economic and political systems to address the climate crisis. She feels that we need to change the policies related to economic and political systems to address climate change. So, capitalism is an important word in the books of many non-fiction writers who are writing about climate change, and capitalism is out there and has been out there for a long time, and it is responsible for climate impacts, and many writers talk about it. The discussion of Silent Spring by Rachel Carson and its impact. In this book, Rachel Carson documented the devastating effects of chemical pesticides, particularly DDT, on birds and other wildlife. She provided scientific evidence showing that these chemicals, once sprayed on crops, could travel through ecosystems and enter the food chain, harming not only the wildlife but also human health. So, we already know that other than DDT, there are many other pesticides, and scientists and environmentalists continuously warn that one should use natural means uh, of putting away pest or controlling pest, rather than using chemical pesticides, and it is the same about fertilizers, because eventually all these chemicals, they seep into the groundwater and they poison the food chain. So it's important uh, that we find the relevance of what she said to today. We can see how futuristic her book is, And as she discusses how wildlife and even human health is harmed because of the use of these chemicals. The book played a pivotal role in the environmental movement of the 1960s and 70s, leading to the banning of DDT in the United States and the establishment of the EPA in 1970. So, we already know that her book was banned for quite some time and was revived only after her death. And after that, DDT was banned in the United States and the EPA was established. Her writing was not only scientifically rigorous but also emotionally compelling. Her vivid descriptions of dying wildlife and contaminated landscapes brought the issue to life for readers, making it impossible to ignore the consequence of pesticide use. So, she is gifted as a writer at giving descriptions, and she can write with a lot of feeling, and she reminds me of what we discussed in the previous lessons about eco spirituality, feeling the sense of oneness with nature, understanding that we share the same earth as all other living creatures, and feeling a oneness, and that evokes a sense of sympathy towards other creatures and towards the earth, and that can be seen in her writing, how she feels the pain of the loss of biodiversity and uh, the cruel killing of species. So, like we talked about climate activism, non-fiction also has far-reaching consequences as it helps to shape environmental policies. Environmental non-fiction has played a crucial role in influencing public opinion and shaping environmental policies. Writers in this genre often expose environmental injustices, corporate malfeasance, and unintended consequences of industrial activities, pushing for policy reforms and greater environmental protections. So, it is the kind of genre in which personal narratives are also used. In this way, writers of the science of the non-fiction genre are able to expose environmental injustices and misdemeanors on the basis of the corporate firms and the outcomes of industrial activities, and thus these by questioning and raising questions, they are able to affect public opinion and policy reforms. And as we know, it's because of this climate activism that today's election issues are also coming to environmental protection in many parts of the world. By informing the public and the policymakers about the complex science behind environmental issues, non-fiction writers help translate scientific knowledge into actionable policies. So, by informing the public about the realities of climate change and about the way it works and what are the issues or hazardous uh, chemicals that are used, what are the impacts on different areas of human life, they are able to sort of bring scientific knowledge uh, to the public, which can take action and which can form an opinion. So, these writings raise awareness, build public pressure, and ultimately contribute to the global push for sustainable environmental practices. The elections, the political parties, they are all uh, putting sustainable environmental practices as agendas. Climate change in contemporary non-fiction. Climate change has become one of the defining global issues of our time, and contemporary nonfiction plays a crucial role in shaping public understanding and awareness of its causes, impacts, and solutions. So, as we just said, public awareness is shaped, public is educated through these climate fiction books, and also in the present day and age, the contemporary writing, the contemporary writers, they highlight global issues of concern, and thus the various panels and various government organizations take it up and form groups and lobbies to work on those issues. Authors, journalists, scientists, and activists use the medium of non-fiction to explore the multifaceted nature of climate crisis, translating complex scientific data into compelling narratives that reach broader audiences. This genre not only provides readers with factual information, but also urges them to reflect on the social, political, economic, and ethical dimensions of the climate emergency. So, what is interesting in this genre is that there are various dimensions of climate issues, of this climate change problem, and it's not just physical problems. There might be problems related to justice, related to society, to politics, to economics, to various other disciplines and areas of human interest. So, this genre helps readers to reflect on climate change in different dimensions. So, contemporary climate change fiction, climate change non-fiction often blends personal stories, scientific analysis, political critique, and calls to action. It challenges the status quo, critiques corporate and government responses to environmental degradation, and examines the interconnectedness of global systems. Writers in this field emphasize the urgency of the crisis, urging immediate attention to mitigate the catastrophic effects of climate change. Through a combination of investigative journalism, scientific reporting, and emotional appeals, contemporary non-fiction seeks to inspire activism, shape public discourse, and influence policy decisions on climate issues. So, even though in the current times there are wars going on, there are mass migrations taking place, yet the climate activists also take note of everything, and the non-fiction writing puts down the facts as they are, and they try to shape the public discourse. They try to bring the issues out onto international platforms or to national platforms, so as to influence the legislation and to the formation of public policies or climate policies. So, as mentioned earlier, these books are very important as far as climate non-fiction is concerned. This changes everything. Capitalism versus the Climate by Naomi Klein, 2014. In this groundbreaking book, Klein argues that the root cause of climate change is the capitalist economic system which prioritizes profit over the environment. She asserts that the climate crisis presents an opportunity to reshape global economies and societies by transitioning away from fossil fuels and embracing more equitable, sustainable systems. So, she looks at the positive side also of things, that climate crisis is forcing us to change our policies, to reshape global economies and societies, and to move away from fossil fuels move away from non-renewable fossil fuels to renewable energy sources, and create a society which is just, equitable and sustainable. So, the aim of a book is to bring awareness and to shape global opinion about this opportunity to make changes in public policy and government policies. So as the title says, this changes everything. So she aims to sort of loosen the hold of capitalism on our society, and thus her book is important as a work of climate non-fiction. We will stop here, and we will continue in the next lesson. Thank you.